Chapter 1. Dante arrives in the crushing darkness that could drive a man insane, the kind of darkness that seems to suck up light, turning it into nothingness. However, this man knew, without a doubt, that the light within himself was brighter. When he starts to lower himself to the ground, he hears an audible crunching sound, such as stepping on a pile of old petrified sticks. He raises his right hand straight out in front of him, and in doing so, releases his light. A glow bursts out of him. His light pushed the darkness away. He is creating an ever-expanding dome walled with crushing black. Even at the speed his light traveled, it seemed he was displacing the darkness, not eliminating it, like creating a bubble underwater, revealing the world he was now in. He could see what he landed on as it dashed out around him. The crunch was that of old bones. As more was revealed around him, the remnants of an age-old war that must have happened 1,000 years ago appeared. Piles of armor were strewn around him, bodies decomposed long ago, and most bones turned to dust, leaving only the dead steel that now lay in a vast sea of shells. The shells of what looked to be a cross between a beetle and a dragon. Massive shells of the beast long past. Their shadows loomed along the makeshift horizon, creating a sickly, jagged mountain range. Dante's attention was set on the size of the war around him, on the great plain he arrived upon. He wondered how deep down he would have to go to reach the soil. This is a dead world. Why would they send her here? The man thought as he started to look for the light. The light he wanted was that of his wife. There was no light, at least not close enough, or God forgive sufficient enough to be seen. He felt a distant energy. It was hers. However, it seemed shaken, broken. As he reared back, placing his feet and hands in a sprinting position, he pushed off with such speed there was a thunderous clap. His feet pushed what must have been hundreds, if not thousands, of rusted armor, and shells careening backward as if in the center of an explosion. The man raced toward the life force he knew was hers. Behind him, a hellacious gorge of mangled corpses followed. Everything that had happened so far in this world had taken less than the blink of an eye. As he spotted the dim light on the horizon, corpses still storming behind him, a horrific realization overtook him. What if time ran much slower here than we thought? He shook this off, his head like a man trying to convince himself that he could not be in such a predicament. However, he was a victim of complacency in a warring life, believing the mighty would always stand if they stayed faithful. This man, who had seen world's end, lived tortured away by the psychotic gods and the workings of others of some unholy cults. Given the scope of what they had done, it is hardly worth mentioning. This man believed that people are not always wicked, and that some beings still stand true. 2. This idea was what defined his actions when he saw the beaten and torn body of Loran, his wife, huddled in a small outcropping, which must have been the remains of a mountaintop. The sight of this made him once again think about the depth. How deep would he have to go? How many corpses and old rotted armor would he have to go through to reach the bottom? What kind of place is this? He muttered, as if the thought was so strong that he had to say it aloud. That may be because that thought was his last rational, complacent thought. As he got closer, he saw. There lay Loran, Dante's wife. No last names, they lost that when they lost their humanity, as bad as that sounds. It seemed like a fair deal. Considering they live forever and cannot reproduce, what was the point? However, the two were determined and eager, even after 500 years. They still believed they could conceive. Now this woman in front of him looked shot up, terrified, so much so that Dante didn't recognize her for an instant. His eyes widened in terror and disbelief, his face almost matching hers. However, hers was more direct. Dante could not speak at the sight of the woman who now sat up with her mouth starting to gape. As if in response, the look of horror on Loran's face began to turn, twisting into a look of terror and rage, a look Dante will wish to forget for the rest of his very long life. 3. Even now, as she sat up, the once strong goddess was now reduced to a tortured soul. Dante never lost sight of the love he held for her. He was worried for her. Dante could not think of how to help. He knew how to, of course he did. He was Dante after all. But at that moment, he felt small, unable to push past the feeling of despair. He was clinging for dear life, holding on to the love he felt for her, However, she did not think of love. She could not think of anything at all. All at once, she lunged for him, anger filling her face, looking at him. She has the look of one longing to kill a long-tired torturer, one that's gotten bored of cutting off fingers or ripping nails from the roots of the soles placed before him. She barrels forward, scratching at him, tearing the flesh from his cheek, leaving gashes that look as if a bear had mauled him. All the while, thought eluded her. All she could see was the nightmare. At that moment, there was no thought of whether there was. She would have wondered how often she had to know that face destroyed everything she ever loved. That thought never came. Who could blame her? She has not eaten real food or slept in months. Was it months? She couldn't remember. Even a god has its limits when in the body of a wielder. After the first month, her mind started to slip. Now, months later, she had gone completely mad. Dante, ignoring the searing pain now coming from the right side of his face, grabs her in an embrace, the same they had shared over countless nights. Warm tears flowed down his cheeks as she flailed hopelessly in his arms, digging her fingers into his flesh up to the knuckle before rearing her hands backward, arms stretching out beside her. All the while, a chorus of ripping flesh like tearing leather, and her sobbing, whimpering, hopeless screams of tormented fear. Dante began to cry for the first time in 1,000 years. The skin she had torn dangling from his back, revealing his ribcage for an instant before it, like the scrape on his face, began to glow. "Let me go, you monster," she howled, rearing her head back, arms still stretched to her sides, now grasping the glowing flesh of her husband, the man she married only 5,000 years ago. "You traitor! How could you? How could you?" As she was saying this, her eyes saw the light coming from the flesh in her hand. Dante, his chin resting on her shoulder, choked with tears, says the only thing he can. "I did nothing. Please listen to my words. I was not here." Dante looked as hopeless as his words seemed. When he said those words, Lorraine had her first pleasant thoughts since she arrived. How long has she been here? How long has it been since she had felt his light? Her mind all at once seemed to return. Her face. Gods, I must look like shit. She chuckles at this thought. Dante pulled back and locked eyes with the now calm woman before him. As she stared back at him, she could see a shimmer of light that seemed to lift the deep wounds in his face. Light floated up like bright white rose petals, leaving unscarred clear skin behind. All the while, there was no blood. Lorraine places her hand on his cheek. She was feeling the last of his light slide between her fingers. "It is you." She whimpers in a dreamy way that even he didn't expect. He thought softly to himself, "This is why I love you. Even after the hell I dare not consider, you, Lorraine, can still see me for me." Dante did not know how true that thought had been. Suddenly, Lorraine grasped his shoulders and stared at him intently, like a sergeant waking up on a battlefield. He snapped out of a daze just in time to warn off an imminent attack. "You must not leave this world. If you do, then they will be able to leave as well." Dante looked at her, startled by this sudden clarity she had shown so quickly after she had been in historical fits. "What happened to you? I've never seen you this way." Lorraine managed a shrug, now more aware of her state than she had been in months. "Yeah, not my finest hour, but seeing you here, even if that damns you to the dark fate I was, sorta walk alone." A grim look came over her face but quickly subsided. "I am grateful, for if I die now, I will be happy to see you, the real you, if only this one last time." 3 words immediately struck Dante. The real you. His mind was letting go of everything that had gone wrong with how the last few moments had shifted. "You mean to say there's a mimic here?" He had a startled voice, the words practically jumping from his mouth. Mimic wouldn't be the right word. If so, he is the strongest I have seen. At points, I thought it was a dream. At others, there could be no doubt. Lorraine began to shiver, tears streaming down, smudging her dirt-covered face like makeup. The lines followed a path, leaving markings on her cheeks, markings that had shown the time she had cried since the last time she bothered to wipe her face, like the rings of a tree. Dante gently wiped her cheeks as she continued speaking. "The bastard could see into my mind." She began to shiver convulsively, feeling as if she might throw up the last of her words. However, this was impossible since she had not eaten, slept, or drunk since she had arrived all those months ago. Had it been months? She didn't know anymore. He made me see you betray everyone. I knew it couldn't be you, but after so long, I started to believe it was true that you would torture me, that you would kill my friends, your friends, when they came to save me. Why? Why did you wait so long to come for me?" At those words, she shrunk into him. Her forehead rested on Dante's chest. "I still can't see what's real or not. He poisoned my mind. Dante and I." She wailed such a sound that could wake the dead, and so it did. 6. At this point, Dante was starting to see the bigger picture. She had been sent out on a code-red distress signal to an unknown universe. The time differential markers must have been changed somehow. Therefore, what should have been a day was months or even years. He shuddered at this thought. Was there someone with access to the Central Command willing to kill her? And why? Why Loran? And why only send him? Maybe Washu, the woman in charge of the operation, saw the treasonous act and turned to him, knowing that he wouldn't sacrifice his wife for anything, regardless of scale or magnitude. He took a deep breath, studying himself, looking for what he would have to say next as he lifted her head. He places his hands firmly on her shoulders, saying the only thing he can think of now. "Lauren, you have only been gone for 50 minutes. Later, when he looks back at this moment, those words will be remembered countless times in unimaginable ways. They sent a chill down Loran's spine. Some are concerned upon realizing what must have happened, others of relief knowing she was not left to rot. But most of all, she was angry, knowing she was betrayed by the people she trusted. It was what she would not believe even in the grips of insanity. Why would someone do this to me? She inhaled sharply, her hands covering her face, and screamed. This time her voice was hoarse and choked. She had heard herself make the same echoing wail so many times, still not wanting to believe it was her own. The pitch that she knew he would dance to, the ones he had danced to. Her light, dim until this point, started to flare, releasing light in wide arcs around her, wrapping the two in a flaming white light. Then, all at once, it was gone. Her light began to dim, yet it was brighter than before. Loran got quiet again. "You mean someone did this, wanted this to happen?" 7. All Dante could do was nod his head and eyes while never losing her gaze. Seeing her alight then roused his spirit, but when Loran's eyes faltered, that light went dim as if she was remembering something deeply unpleasant. Her gaze fell to her lap as her chin dropped to her chest. "It's hopeless. In a way, I hoped you would never come for me. I knew this happened, but I wouldn't believe it." Loran says this so directly that Dante starts to smirk, giving her a look that says, "Don't worry, I am here now." He stood up, bristled at the nothingness that surrounded them. As he surveyed the area, a question came to him. If there was nothing here, how could his wife, the strongest woman he had ever met, have been so overcome by this? She stood to face him as he extended his hand, yet did not reach her. Their eyes met as if knowing this was going to end soon. "Dante, we're surrounded," Loran warned calmly, despite her cracked voice. "How many?" he asked. "Immeasurable, but large enough that they fill every shadow. They're all around us right now. However, the smaller ones have learned not to attack. They cannot withstand our light." Loran smirked, regaining some confidence, then continued. "It's not them you should worry about, the shifters. At least I think there is more than one. Even so, something tells me there may be only one controlling everything. It's insane, but it makes sense somehow." 8. As she spoke, Dante became increasingly aware of these shadows. They were moving, but not all at once, almost like oil on water's surface. He could see what appeared to be clawed hands trying to reach out towards them. They were coming from everywhere now. Even the horizon seemed to have eyes that were fixated on the couple surrounding them. He could hear the sound of grinding bones as he studied that horizon. Before he could go any deeper, Loran slapped him. "Pay attention," she barked, instantly snapping him out of his trance. He focused only on her, and in that moment her voice spoke up in his mind. "We have to take out all of the eyes. They are sharing knowledge somehow. When one observes something, they are all able to. Although they can't all shift, they can use simple and advanced techniques. That's why we can't leave. Some might look like others, but can't mimic the energy to complicate it further. They can't make that energy because they don't have enough of it. If they learn to jump, the entire verse will be in danger. Even though individually they appear to have limited power, they have an arsenal of other abilities. Dante would have asked her if she was serious, but he didn't have to. When she spoke to him this way, it was always serious. This was something the two of them were used to doing, the do or everyone dies moment. Despite the incredible nature of the situation, Dante knew his wife was not exaggerating its severity. "Can you still fight?" Dante asks with admiration in his voice. Loran sat back down. Clouds of dust rolled out from under her as she did so. "I haven't eaten or slept since I came here." The realization of this and the relief of seeing her husband, her real husband, the fury and rage from what she had learned, it was all she could take. Her eyes fluttered, her head drooped, and she started to fall asleep. "I can't," she thought. "If I sleep, they will take me. He will take Mem." When she began to fall, Dante reached down, took a knee, and laid her head on his thigh, lowering them slowly to the ground so her head lay on his lap. Dante started running his hands through her hair, stroking her gently as she slept. Those brilliant white petals rose from his touch. He knew that the one who did this was watching them. The beast is ready to tempt the wrath of the gods. However, Dante was not angry. He was not going to give whatever those things were a damn thing, especially his anger, or so he thought. Chapter 2. Run. 1. As Loran slept, Dante lifted his finger to his temple. "Washu, come in, this is Dante. We have a Code Black incident. Repeat a Code Black." After a few moments of silence, he knew there was no hope of reaching anyone. For all he knew, it had only been a few seconds since he had left that universe. He sighed deeply, calming his mind, and started to search for an answer. This would be the place if they wanted to get rid of someone, but wielders such as us could leave. If it weren't for those damn eyes, gods know I would have, so why send us? Unless they knew those things were there and wanted us to run. That must be it. They wanted us to let these things out. What could be so important about those things that someone would sacrifice so easily, committing treason so large that it would cost multiple universes? 2. You're wondering why you were sent here, aren't you? A voice, that of a growl with a sharp hissing sound, came out of the shadows. As soon as he heard the voice, he drew his weapon. The weapon seemed to form itself out of light. It was beating off the glowing gun as it grew from his hand. White rose petals were rising once again, but now they were burning to cinder until the gun lay in his hand. He fired on the voice before it finished the first word. Even though there was an audible thunk, the unforgettable sound like an exploding watermelon, the voice did not stutter. Did I miss? Dante thought. I heard the sound my bullet makes when it hits its mark, but if it wasn't him, then what did I hit? The shadow, now smoking off to his right side, had nothing to say. Just then, Washu came stumbling out from behind the rock, a gaping hole where her chest would be. She looked unreal, the hole so large it should have cut her in half. She let out a choked, gurgling noise, moving her lips and trying to ask, "Why?" Dante shot again, this time only leaving the legs. "Nice shot," that voice said, coming from his left. At that, Dante lowered his gun to his side and stroked Loran's hair again. "Ignoring me, nice try." She tried the same after a while, so you're ahead of the game. Congratulations. The voice now seemed to come from different shadows, the ones formed by the endless piles of the 1,000-year-old armor, and the hides of bug-like creatures were as hollow as the armor surrounding them. The voices constantly jumping between the shadows as if the voices of the dead were speaking to him. "I don't mind," the voice said with a touch of humor in that animalistic tone. He was enjoying every moment and loving the new meat thrown to him by the god that damned him here in the first place. When his voice returned, it was gleeful. "I like to talk, and whether you listen or not, that's up to you. Again, I don't mind." After a pause, as if waiting for a reply, he continued. "She was easy to break, you know." Those words prompted another bullet, destroying his shadow and the inevitable dead friend on the other side. But when all you have to work with is hell's unwanted guests, I guess I am used to having something more, experienced. How do you like the show, by the way? I've been working on it since you got here. It's a bit rushed, but it was grand. It was an oldie, but a goodie. Friend behind every shadow, isn't it great? Dante thought he could see him smirking at that comment. The voices for it changed its tone and position constantly. You and she deserve the best misery I have to offer. It's my pleasure to dish it out, for you two should not be here. The voice bellowed laughter. You two have never even seen hell. I can tell, yes indeed. He continued to hold back laughter, saying, You don't even know where you are, but I do. 3. Dante, fed up with this thing by the second shadow, paid no heed to the voice taunting him. He had heard it before and had seen this game played by mimics. Somehow, though, this must have been different. How in God's name did she lose to that? There must be more. Again, he spoke the thought out loud as if his mind could not hold it, and it ate at him. This arrogant demon could not have bested her. What is IT? The voices asked with a distasteful kind of condescension. That of a parent to a child wanting to catch them in a lie. Do you not want to know where you are? I know you're trying not to listen. She said you never listened to her either. Silence is all it received as a reply. At least when I was playing nice. Still silent, adjusting Lauren in his lap. You are going to be safe now. The words felt as bitter and false as they were. A chill ran through him, an old feeling he had not felt in many years, and he shivered. At that moment, the world around him began to shift. The once battle-rotten landscape was changing. The dull, gray-black rusted color of his surroundings was replaced with the green of a meadow adorned with flowers of all colors and shapes. Dante knew this place before it finished forming. The one in which he would spend countless hours with Lorraine. The place where they fell in love. In the world they first met. This is his place of peace. Nonetheless, now he sits, stroking the tangled mess of hair on Lorraine's head, her horrific state driven even deeper into his mind. Here, under the tree they had sat so many times before, he started to weep, unable to hold back the memories of her innocent smile and the dimples that formed on her cheeks as she laughed. The same woman lay on his lap just as she did then. Now she did not have dimples. Jutting cheekbones replaced them, her lips chapped, broken, and bleeding. Her eyes darted back and forth under her eyelids, darkened by deep sockets. Lids closed but fluttering as if trying to force them to stay shut. Dante looked down at her, tears streaming from cheeks covered in filth. The god named Dante stood overtaken. For, as Dante's screams echoed through the grass field, a field that heard Lorraine's cries countless times for many reasons, the monster began to dance. Oh, do I love that sound! Please give me more! The clattering of bones he had heard started up again, louder and more pronounced. When he lifted his head, he saw someone at the bottom of the hill where the old and elegant cherry blossom tree stood alone. Down the hill, about 30 yards away, stood a man in an all-black tux wearing a top hat. Sorry about the noise. Some parts of me don't know how to control themselves. At this, Dante started to laugh. This caught the man off guard. His distaste was clearly shown on his face, but it quickly subsided. Dante raised his head to speak, but before he could, the world created around him suddenly went ablaze. As the sun that was never there went out, the fire danced quickly across the tips of the grass. Dante noticed that the grass started burning at the same time. The fire seemed to dance gracefully, as if a sheet of fire was slowly snuffing out the light. The world is now observable only through the light of a smoldering fire. Dante could not help but admire the beauty of death. However, instead of running, Dante just sat there, eyes fixed on this man. He was saying all he had to speak with those eyes. They blazed enough to still even the bravest of souls. The monster returned the stare with a smile. I think it's my turn too. But before the man could finish, Dante had wrenched the tongue from his mouth, all the while never letting Lorraine's head hit the ground. His right hand was outstretched, now holding the mauled pink mess of a tongue. As he leered at it, he saw that the blood streaming down was black. Sitting on the heels of his feet, the veins he had torn with the tongue dangled nearly to the ground. You can bleed, but can you die? Dante smiled at the tongue now, obviously not a tongue, but a black hunk of meat. How about we find out? The laughter returned along with the clatter of bones. Had the man been laughing the whole time, he couldn't tell. The man in the top hat. He noticed it was still there, a visceral